Hello history fans and welcome to the podcast that helps you learn a little bit of history. Today we're talking about Hades, Greek god of the underworld, or if you prefer the Roman name, Pluto. But we're focusing on the Greek mythology since the Romans stole most of it from them anyway. Before I tell you some of the stories about him though, let's hear what others have to say about Hades and the underworld. First is Robert Graves' version of the Greek myths. Let me just grab it from behind me. Apologies, audio listeners, if it goes a bit quiet for a second. So, Robert Graves, The Greek Myths, the complete and definitive edition. This is a Penguin publication, if you're interested. So, I might just read you this whole little chapter. It's only it's about 2 pages, so I think that's fine. I think it's chapter 31, The Gods of the Underworld. I keep looking at my light rather than at you, so sorry about that. The Gods of the Underworld. When ghosts descend to Tartarus, the main entrance to which lies in a grove of black poplars beside the ocean stream, each is supplied by pious relatives with a coin laid under the tongue of its corpse. They are thus able to pay Chiron, or Charon. It's not Karen, sorry, it's just spelt like Karen. Charon, actually. Anyway, sorry. They are thus able to pay Charon, the miser who ferries them in a crazy boat across the Styx. This hateful river bounds Tartarus on the western side, and has for its tributaries Acheron, Phlegethon, Cocytus, Ionis, and Lethe. Penniless ghosts must wait forever on the near bank, unless they have evaded Hermes, their conductor, and crept down by a back entrance, such as at Laconian Taenarus, or Thesprotian Iournum. A 3-headed, or some say 50-headed dog named Cerberus guards the opposite shore of the Styx, ready to devour living intruders or ghostly fugitives. The first region of Tartarus contains the cheerless asphodel fields, where souls of heroes stay without purpose among the throngs of less distinguished dead that twitter like bats, and where only Orion still has the heart to hunt the ghostly deer. None of them but would rather live in bondage to a landless peasant than rule over all Tartarus. Their one delight is in libations of blood poured to them by the living. When they drink, they feel themselves almost men again. Beyond these meadows lie Erebus and the palace of Hades and Persephone. To the left of the palace, as one approaches it, a white cypress shades the pool of Lethe, where the common ghosts flock down to drink. Initiated souls avoid this water, choosing to drink instead from the pool of memory, shaded by a white poplar. And there's a question mark in brackets there. Should we find out why? It doesn't say. I think maybe it's poplar tree. That's the thing, isn't it? Shaded by a white poplar, which gives them a certain advantage over their fellows. Close by, newly arrived ghosts are daily judged by Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, at a place where 3 roads meet. Rhadamanthus tries Asiatics, and Aeacus tries Europeans, but both refer the difficult cases to Minos. As each verdict is given, the ghosts are directed along one of the 3 roads, that leading back to the asphodel meadows, if they are neither virtuous nor evil, that leading to the punishment field of Tartarus if they are evil, that leading to the orchards of Elysium if they are virtuous. Elysium, ruled over by Kronos, lies near Hades' dominions, its entrance close to the pool of memory, but forms no part of them. It is a happy land of perpetual day, without cold or snow, where games, music, and revels never cease, and where the inhabitants may elect to be born on earth whenever they please. Nearby are the Fortunate Islands, reserved for those who have been 3 times born, and 3 times attained Elysium. That's impressive. But some say that there is another fortunate isle called Luce, Luce, in the Black Sea, opposite the mouths of the Danube, wooded and full of beasts, wild and tame, where the ghosts of Helen and Achilles hold high revelry and declaim Homer's verses to heroes who have taken part in the events celebrated by him. Hades, who is fierce and jealous of his rights, seldom visits the upper air, except on business or when he is overcome by sudden lust. Once he dazzled the nymph Minthe with the splendour of his golden chariot and its 4 black horses, and would have seduced her without difficulty had not Queen Persephone made a timely appearance and metamorphosed Minthe into sweet-smelling mint. On another occasion, Hades tried to violate the nymph Luce, again L-E-U-C-E, who was similarly metamorphosed into the white poplar standing by the pool of memory. He willingly allows none of his subjects to escape, and few who visit Tartarus return alive to describe it, which makes him the most hated of the gods. Hades never knows what is happening in the world above, or in Olympus, except for fragmentary information which comes to him when mortals strike their hands upon the earth and invoke him with oaths and curses. His most prized possession is his helmet of invisibility, given him as a mark of gratitude by the Cyclops when he consented to release them at Zeus's order. All the riches of gems and precious metals hidden beneath the earth are his, but he owns no property above ground, except for certain gloomy temples in Greece and possibly a herd of cattle in the island of Eurythia, which some say really belong to Helios. Queen Persephone, however, can be both gracious and merciful. She is faithful to Hades, but has had no children by him, and prefers the company of Hecate, goddess of witches, to his. Zeus himself honours Hecate so greatly that he never denies her the ancient power which she has always enjoyed, of bestowing on mortals or withholding from them any desired gift. She has 3 bodies and 3 heads, lion, dog, and mare. Tisiphone, Alecto, and Megaera, the Erinyes or Furies, live in Erebus, and are older than Zeus or any of the other Olympians. Their task is to hear complaints brought by mortals against the insolence of the young to the aged, of children to parents, of hosts to guests, and of householders or city councils to suppliants, and to punish such crimes by hounding the culprits relentlessly, without rest or pause, from city to city and from country to country. These Erinyes are crones, with snakes for hair, dogs' heads, coal black bodies, bats' wings, and bloodshot eyes. In their hands they carry brass-studded scourges, and their victims die in torment. It is unwise to mention them by name in conversation, hence they are usually styled the Eumenides, which means the kindly ones, as Hades is styled Pluton or Pluto, the rich one. And that has basically told you everything I'm about to tell you. Actually, no, that's not true, because you want to keep listening, right? So hang on and I'll retell exactly that in a minute. Anyway, I just like the way that Robert Graves writes. Should we hear from some ancient sources? And by sources, I mean 1, Homer, from the Iliad and the Odyssey. Again, audio listeners, I apologise, but video watchers, how pretty is this copy of the Odyssey? It is, again, a Penguin one, and it's translated by Robert Fagles. So he's mentioned in here Hades in the Underworld, but I found a few random quotes in the Iliad. If you do want to find like where he's mentioned, it's in random sentences, in random bits, and you can quite easily just Google where is Hades mentioned in the Iliad and the Odyssey. But here's 2 bits from the Iliad. This is book 5, and it is line 390. And Dione, or Dion, however you like to say it, is talking about the gods suffering. So just a bit of the bit before, from 390. Hera suffered too, when Heracles, mighty son of Amphitryon, hit her in the right breast with a 3-barbed arrow. She was in absolute agony. And dread Hades had to suffer, like the rest, when that same Heracles, son of Zeus, who drives the storm cloud, shot him with a flying arrow at Hell's Gate among the dead and hurt him very badly. Sick at heart and in excruciating pain, Hades found his way to high Olympus and Zeus's palace. The arrow had driven into his shoulder muscles and was giving him considerable distress. However, Phaon, there's a double E in there, so I feel like it's Phaon, the healer, spread pain-killing herbs on the wound and healed him, for, after all, he was immortal. But what a self-willed monster that Heracles was! He cared so little what wickedness he set his hand to, that he harassed the gods who lived on Olympus with his bow. Crazy times. So Heracles injured the mighty Hades. And then this next bit is from book 9, and it's around line 450. It's literally just a line, but I'll read it to you anyway. So basically, what is happening at line 450 is Phoenix's speech, and he's talking about having a quarrel with his father, who wants to bring home another woman, and it's all about that kerfuffle, basically. And Phoenix's mother tells him to sleep with the woman so that his father won't, basically. So he does, and then he says, "My father guessed at once, and with solemn curses called on the hateful Furies to make me childless, so he would never have to lift a son of mine onto his lap. And over time the gods, Zeus of the Underworld and August Persephone, fulfills his curses." That's literally it. That's all I wanted to read you, but I just quite like that Hades is referred to as Zeus of the Underworld. But Persephone still gets her own name, of course. So, with those random quotes said, let's chat a bit more about the history, and maybe you'll like the way I say it rather than Robert. So, the oldest descriptions of the underworld come from the Iliad and the Odyssey, but other ancient poets like Hesiod do describe it similarly. In the Odyssey, the underworld is beyond the western horizon, with Odysseus reaching it by ship after leaving Circe's island, and ghosts are later taken there by Hermes, as the guide of the dead, who takes them through the hollows of the earth, encircling the river Oceanus, and to the gates of the setting sun, to their final resting place in Hades, because it was referred to as Hades sometimes. The underworld in this instance is a term that is used to describe the different realms of the underworld found in Greek mythology, which are beneath the earth or beyond the horizon, and it's divided up into different areas. So we have the Great Pit of Tartarus, originally the prison of the Titan gods, but later it's a dungeon of the damned souls. Then we have the land of the dead, which is ruled by Hades, sometimes called the house or the domain of Hades too. It's also sometimes called Erebus, who is the personification of darkness, the child of chaos, and the father of Nyx, or night. But in this case, it's being used to refer to the actual darkness of the underworld, and the region the souls would pass through to reach Hades. The land of Hades also includes the asphodel meadows, or the fields, which is where the majority of the ordinary souls were. One of the three main, divisions of the underworld is Hades, with Tartarus and Elysium. His domain also covers Styx, which is the goddess and the river of the underworld, and Acheron, or the river of woe, 2 of the 5 rivers you find in the underworld. The third main part or division of the underworld was the Island of the Blessed, or the Eleusinian Islands, ruled by Kronos, depending on who you ask, which is where the great heroes reside after death. And then there's the Elysian Fields, which is where the virtuous dead were sent to dwell, which was ruled by Rhadamanthus, who was the son of Zeus and Europa, originally the king of Crete, but then one of the judges of the dead. So overall I think that's what we call Elysium, and that's the 3 main domains of the underworld: Tartarus, Hades and Elysium. There's also 5 rivers. I've already mentioned Styx, the river of hate, and Acheron, the river of sorrow, but there's also Cocytus, the river of lamentation, Phlegethon, the river of fire, and Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Of course, concepts of the underworld evolved over time, and the Homeric hymns and Pindar's poems are the ones that introduced the paradise-like realm of Elysium, which is the blessed afterlife where the virtuous dead were sent. The dead entered the underworld by crossing the river Acheron or Styx, and they were ferried across by Chiron, who they had to pay a small coin to, which was hopefully placed in the mouth of the deceased by their relatives. If not, the paupers or friendless gathered forever on the shore. The far side of the shore was guarded by Cerberus, the 3-headed guard dog of Hades. The creature guarded the gates that souls could pass through to enter but never leave. It's after passing these gates that they faced the 3 judges, Rhadamanthus, Minos and Akos. who decided the severity of their sentence based on their life, and they'd be sent wherever it was believed they deserved. But how did Hades end up there? Well, before the Greek gods, the Titans ruled with Kronos as their leader, and he had children with Rhea. Their children were the Olympians. The main six you possibly know already. We have Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. But Kronos fears his children will overthrow him, just as he did to his father Oceanus, so he swallows them, apart from Zeus, the youngest, who Rhea hides, and actually feeds Kronos a rock instead. Zeus then overthrows his father, and the three sons divide up the rule. Zeus takes the sky, Poseidon takes the ocean, and Hades the underworld, ultimately meaning that their power was regarded in that order too. It's always Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. Zeus the Almighty. Hades is said to have had a palace made of silver and gold, decorated with precious metals and jewels, since he has access to all the riches under the earth. The rooms were said to be described by Persephone as a dazzling wealth of brilliance, to rival that of Mount Olympus. But you could only reach the palace if Hades wanted you to, and the unwelcome could walk for eternity without finding it. Persephone was the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, who Hades tricked into becoming his wife. Well, no, so he firstly abducts her on one of his rare visits to the land and takes her to his palace. And this story is actually how we have the changing of seasons, because her mother is sad when she's away, so we have winter, but she's happy during spring and summer when she's got her daughter back. Persephone spends half the year with her mother and the other half with her husband, and so becomes the queen of the underworld. But shall we hear the actual myth? I think so. Let's read Robert's retelling. This is actually quite a long section, so tuck in, strap in, whether you're in a car or in bed, tuck in or strap in. Right. Demeter lost her gaiety forever when young Kore, afterwards called Persephone, was taken from her. Hades fell in love with Kore and went to ask Zeus's leave to marry her. Zeus feared to offend his eldest brother by a downright refusal, but knew also that Demeter would not forgive him if Kore was committed to Tartarus. He therefore answered politically that he could neither give nor withhold his consent. This emboldened Hades to abduct the girl, as she was picking flowers in a meadow. It may have been at Sicilian Enna, or at Attic Colonus, or at Hermione, or somewhere in Crete, or near Pisa, or near Lerna, or besides the Arcadian Phoenix, or at Boeotian Nysa, or anywhere else in the widely separated regions which Demeter visited in her wandering search for Kore. But her own priests say that it was at Eleusis. She sought Kore without rest for 9 days and nights, neither eating nor drinking, and calling fruitlessly all the while. The only news she could get came from old Hecate, who early one morning had heard Kore crying out, but on hurrying to the rescue, found no sign of her. On the 10th day, after a disagreeable encounter with Poseidon among the herds of Oncus, that's a funny name, Demeter came in disguise to Eleusis, where King Celeus and his wife Metaneira entertained her hospitably, and she was invited to remain as a wet nurse to Demophoon, the newly born prince. Their lame daughter Iambe tried to console Demeter with comically lascivious verses, and the dry nurse, old Balbo, persuaded her to drink barley water by a jest. She groaned as if in travail, and unexpectedly produced from beneath her skirt Demeter's own son Iacchus, who leaped into his mother's arms and kissed her. "Oh, how greedily you drink," cried Abas, the elder son of Celeus, as Demeter gulped the pitcherful of barley water, which was flavoured with mint. Demeter threw him a grim look, and he was metamorphosed into a lizard. Somewhat ashamed of herself, Demeter now decided to do Celeus a service, by making Demophoon, or Demophon, immortal. That night she held him over the fire to burn away his mortality. Metaneira, who was the daughter of Amphictyon, happened to enter the hall before the process was complete, and broke the spell. So Demophoon died. "Mine is an unlucky house," Celeus complained, weeping at the fate of his 2 sons, and thereafter was called Diceoles. "Dry your tears, Diceoles," said Demeter. You still have 3 sons, including Triptolemus, of whom I intend to confer such great gifts that you will forget your double loss. For Triptolemus, who herded his father's cattle, had recognized Demeter and given her the news she needed. 10 days before this, his brothers, Eumolpus, a shepherd, and Eubuleus, a swineherd, had been out in the fields feeding their beasts, when the earth suddenly gaped open, engulfing Eubuleus's swine before his very eyes. Then, with a heavy thud of hoofs, a chariot drawn by black horses appeared and dashed down the chasm. The chariot driver's face was invisible, but his right arm was tightly clasped around a shrieking girl. Eumolpus had been told of the event by Eubulus, and made it the subject for a lament. Armed with this evidence, Demeter summoned Hecate. Together they approached Helios, who sees everything, and forced him to admit that Hades had been the villain, doubtless with the connivance of his brother Zeus. Demeter was so angry that instead of returning to Olympus, she continued to wander about the earth, forbidding the trees to yield fruit and herbs to grow, until the race of men stood in danger of extinction. Zeus, ashamed to visit Demeter in person at Eleusis, sent her first a message by Iris, of which she took no notice. And then a deputation of the Olympian gods, with conciliatory gifts, begging her to be reconciled to his will. But she would not return to Olympus, and swore that the earth must remain barren until Kore had been restored. Only one course of action remained for Zeus. He sent Hermes with a message to Hades. "If you do not restore Kore, we are all undone," and with another to Demeter. "You may have your daughter again, on the single condition that she has not yet tasted the food of the dead." Because Kore had refused to eat so much as a crust of bread ever since her abduction, Hades was obliged to cloak his vexation, telling her mildly, "My child, you seem to be unhappy here, and your mother weeps for you. I have therefore decided to send you home." Kore's tears ceased to flow, and Hermes helped her to mount his chariot. But, just as she was setting off for Eleusis, one of Hades' gardeners, by name Ascalaphus, began to cry and hoot derisively. Having seen the Lady Kore, he said, "Pick a pomegranate from a tree in your orchard and eat 7 seeds. I am ready to bear witness that she has tasted the food of the dead." Hades grinned and told Ascalaphus to perch on the back of Hermes' chariot. At Eleusis, Demeter joyfully embraced Kore, but on hearing about the pomegranate, grew more dejected than ever, and said again, "I will neither return to Olympus, nor remove my curse from the land." Zeus then persuaded Rhea, the mother of Hades, Demeter, and himself, to plead with her, and a compromise was at last reached. Kore would spend 3 months of the year in Hades' company, as Queen of Tartarus, with the title Persephone, and the remaining 9 in Demeter's. Hecate offered to make sure that this arrangement was kept, and to keep constant watch on Kore. Demeter finally consented to return home. Before leaving Eleusis, she instructed Triptolemus, Eumolpus, and Celeus, together with Diocles, king of Phrygia, who had been assiduously searching for Kore all this while, in her worship and mysteries. But she punished Ascalaphus for his tale-bearing by pushing him down a hole and covering it with an enormous rock, from which he was finally released by Heracles, and then she changed him into a short-eared owl. She also rewarded the Phaeacians of Arcadia, in whose house she rested after Poseidon had outraged her, with all kinds of grain, but forbade them to sow beans, and that is the story. I'm very sorry if that was a bit stop-starty. I was really struggling with saying the names out loud. When you read names like that, it's fine in your head, and then you try to pronounce them, and it's just too many, is it too many vowels, too many syllables? I don't know. Anyway, that's the story of Persephone. Back to Hades, though. He's said to have preferred spending his time in the Underworld and only ventured to Mount Olympus when a matter of great concern came up. But even though the Underworld was his domain, he's not the god of death. Thanatos was the god of death. When being called Pluto by the Romans, he becomes the god of wealth because of all the precious metals in the earth and the wealth that fertile soil can bring people. The Greeks, however, massively feared Hades, avoiding even saying his name, believing that it might cause a quicker death. So they also call him Pluton. Hades is often seen on his ebony throne, wearing the helmet given to him by the Cyclops during the Titan War, which gives him invisibility, and with his bident, the two-pronged staff-like pitchfork that was capable of shattering anything in his path. He's also commonly with Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who was referred to as the Hound of Hades. Various people try to enter and exit the underworld in Greek mythology, like Orpheus, who travelled to the underworld to find his wife Eurydice. His musical skills impressed Hades, so much so that he said he could take his wife back if he didn't look at her until they reached the surface, which sadly, as you might know, he fails. Percy Jackson also visits, of course, but that's not really real mythology. And Heracles was given a task by King Eurystheus to bring him Cerberus to prove his fearlessness. Heracles enters the underworld and asks Hades for Cerberus, who's taken aback by his courage and said, "Yes, okay, you can take him if you could wrestle the creature and then return him back from the real world unharmed." So the story goes, according to some. So Hades does give people a chance to earn what they want from him. He doesn't just completely turn them away. He'll give them what they want if they can prove themselves worthy, arguably making him one of the more fairer gods of Greek mythology. But then again, I think anyone is better than Zeus. He's merciless if you've committed dreadful sins, but if you want your wife back, you can at least try. And with that, we reach the end of today's episode. If you'd like a proper deep dive rather than a summary, we can give it a go. Or actually, maybe let me know which other god or goddess you'd like to hear about next. I'll put a little question thing up on Instagram stories, or let me know in the comments below if you are watching on YouTube. Thank you very much for listening. If you are, please give it a 5-star rating or download to listen on the go. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and leave a comment of who we should talk about next. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Bye.